it's my experience that introverts are better leaders than extroverts, because the mere ability to think before talking is already stoic in itself.
Hey, Sarah, you're doing a lot of leadership coaching, and I wanted to focus a little bit more on leadership and some of the discussions I'm having on the podcast. So, what are the challenges that you see most people face when they make the leap from individual contributor to leader?
Especially in the engineering field, which I see you're deeply involved in, so this will make sense for you. Very often, the people which get promoted into leadership positions, they were experts in their field, maybe content experts or tech experts or something like this. And also, very often, they have personality traits which involve more drive, ambition, maybe a over zealous nature to help others or to prove themselves worthy. There's quite commonality between, let's say, the things which get you promoted. The biggest challenge is what happens afterwards. A lot of people think that what brought them to that promotion or to that new position is exactly what they need to do or continue doing in order to succeed. Very often, businesses that promote people don't invest in proper leadership training. And so there's a combination of things that are happening there. You have the person which was always so successful. They're used to being rewarded and achieving. Maybe they were at the top of their class or something like this. And then they want to continue doing that. So they have this kind of fear to show that they're struggling, that they're swimming, that they're scared to be vulnerable. Because they haven't had any leadership training, they don't actually realize that you need to be able to get into that space in order to lead effectively. And they are so afraid of failing that they step into, let's say, the same role that they had before, and they push others down from being able to step up into the ownership and into the learning and into the growing. And they don't mean to. A lot of new leaders inadvertently micromanage, or if they are an investigator type, they silo themselves away as they solve it, not including others in their solutionizing. They have a lot of anti-patterns that they just follow. And like I said, it's not just the fault of that person standing in that role. So many organizations don't take the seriousness of a leader is a different role. The skills that you need to be an effective leader are absolutely different. And in tech, the people that chose tech, in general, of course, it's in general, you can't say all people. But one of the reasons we chose tech is because we maybe didn't 100% fit in with the cool kids. Maybe we're a bit more introverted. Maybe we found more comfort in the spaces of our rooms or our dungeons, or let's say behind the computer. Maybe we're kind of okay with like Discord chats or things like that, but not the best communicators, or let's say getting into our emotions or feelings in the same way that maybe the rest of the company is, like the more extroverted people, the more socializers. Imagine the cool kids on the block. They usually are the ones that end up in the sales and marketing and these kind of positions. And so you find yourself in this role where you're rubbing shoulders with this absolutely different personality type, because of course, engineering managers, for example, are coming from tech. They're not, let's say, those cool kids that went into management. So they mean well, they care a lot, They can have immense empathy, but they don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to influence. They don't know how to do these very important things that you need to be able to do as a leader.
I can totally empathize with that. When you say in general, we didn't nearly talk to people. I mean, a lot of what drew me to software engineering was people are messy, people are difficult, we're irrational. I tell a computer 2 plus 2, it gives me 4. I want to, I can be a software engineer, just talk to
Logical
a computer all day.
people, yes.
It's logical and rational, and I don't have to deal with messy people. Little did I know. So you hit on a whole bunch of things there that really resonate with me. I think what best sums it up in a way is that what got you here is not what will take you beyond, is it, as a manager? You know, you succeeded as an individual contributor because you were technically very good at things. And that desire to solve problems can mean, as you say, you lock yourself in the room and start trying to figure it out, or you start trying to tell everyone else, this is how I would do that. And absolutely, I'm totally with you on the training. One of my biggest beefs with every company I've worked for is that they either don't do any training for new leaders, or every single manager that comes into the company gets trained. But the training isn't about leadership.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing. It's so generic, and they are teaching you like, this is how you do this process. This is how you do this thing. This is how you. It's not what you need to grow as a leader. To grow as a leader, you have to know yourself so deep, self-actualize, be able to differentiate from who you are and who that is, and be able to see within somebody their inner desires, passions, talents, and bring it to the top towards actually achieving, let's say, a also team dynamic with others that have different things coming out to the top towards productivity. And that is not teaching, this is how you handle the financial paper of this. Even this is how you have this is how you influence. This is how you have a hard conversation. This is how, it's not actually, of course, those things are aspects, but it's not self-empowered leadership. It's not how you stand there confident and grounded, and you move from that reacting and this unstable ground to responding and being that stoic person which your teams can depend on, and be able to, let's say, not jump to everything or just do what is told here. You need to be able to be balanced enough to be able to effectively inspire others and move groups.
Yeah, absolutely. And leadership should be about that inspiration, that vision, and as you mentioned earlier, being vulnerable. And you're right, instead, I got processes. This is how you approve somebody's expenses. This is how you approve somebody's holiday. This is how you, and the closest I came to anything useful on the management side was, this is how you deal with poor performance. This is how you do the PIP. And I was always left wondering, like, why do we assume that my job as a manager is to run a PIP? Why don't we assume that my job is to create a high performance team? Why don't we do some training on that? Why don't we do some training on how to create the right environment for a team to thrive? Why don't we do some training on how to be vulnerable, as you said, and how to have empathy with people, how to create a team where people feel safe being vulnerable?
Yeah, 100%.
Crazy,
and if you think about it, because you are coming from the engineering world, one of the best ways to disempower teams is to treat them like coding monkeys, right? So you just pass a story to them and they code, like, they get disconnected, disengaged, they're not empowered, and you get shitty solutions because they're like in this like small scope. They're doing the same things to leaders when they say, this is what you do, this is what you do, this is what you do. You are taking them away from being able to strategize, solutionize, and use their talents and thoughts on how to make this team productive. I'm not going to do it the same way that you do it, but if you give me this checklist, I become a secretary that's just doing what my top management is telling me all the time. I'm not motivated, excited, empowered, and that is going to bleed into my team in the same way that coding monkeys disengage.
And equally, even if you and I were identical in how we were going to be managers, we'd have different people on our team. And actually, how we lead those different people needs to change for who they are, for their strengths, their
100%.
weaknesses, how they work, what styles they have, what personality they have. So it's not homogenous. I mean, there's some general traits we can use, but we try and force everything to, as you say, pushing tickets down.
And this is the cookie cutter. This is how you, and it's not. It's so like, because I wrote a leadership book, and there is no, this is like how to make the perfect team, check, 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 check. It's about, this is how you can figure out people. And this is how you can combine people in different ways and how you can handle these different reactions. And maybe that's also part of the problem if you think about engineering managers, because engineering managers are logical. They like usually mathematics or problem solving. So you give them a framework. They're like, oh, perfect. I'll just follow the framework. People are messy. Doesn't follow, of course, I provide all kind of frameworks to help, but it's all about breaking also away from those frameworks, understanding where you need to bend and break, and where do you see the messy human in that, and allow them to exist.
I think you've hit on another problem there slightly, in that it's not just engineering managers. Whether I've been at a small startup with 20 people or an enterprise with 20,000 people, I've seen time and again that the whole engineering hierarchy, from
Head of
junior
tech,
through to
CTO, it's all of them. It's everything on the tech side, leadership, have these problems.
Yeah, I mean, 18 months ago, I was working with a telco. It was thousands of people, thousands of engineers, VP, chief architect, probably the CTO job spec, but I didn't see it, all listed half a dozen technical skills. Not one leadership or people skill. It was all about deeply technical stuff.
I worked in a company once where the CTO would get in and just start writing code in their code base. They were all too afraid to tell them that the code that they were writing was crap, that they had to always fix all of the mistakes that the CTO was creating. Yeah, it's not leadership.
So have you dealt with a CTO like that?
Yeah, that's a real example. I'm not going to say who, but it's a real example.
Okay, cool. Let's pull that thread. What advice would you give them to be a better CTO then? How can they step away from that?
I was still an engineer. And it was actually one of my breakthroughs. I'd been a head of engineering before, and then I went back to being an engineer after I moved to the Netherlands. So there was like a time where I was up, and then it's not really up and down, it's just different roles, different hats. Anyway, I was an engineer on the team, and the CTO was too heavily involved in the tech. And how did I do it? First of all, I explained to them that what they were doing as Agile was absolutely not Agile. And I explained that the team doesn't really feel psychologically safe. Obviously more of a leader, even though I was an engineer at the time, in the way that I could somehow approach the CTO in this way and have this conversation. And then he told me, okay, Sarah, great ideas. Can you teach us? And that's actually where my first Agile program started. It started with that company. I stepped into being, I trained the team in how to be more Agile, how to be more psychologically safe, all of this stuff. And then he wanted me to train the rest of the company. And I ended up, I still have that in my, what you call box of things that I can do. But as an engineer, that doesn't have those, let's say, leadership skills, it would have been very difficult. I had invested in myself in training and becoming, let's say, a leader way before I stepped into the leadership role at that point. So it was, I knew better maybe how to have these conversations with someone up. In the end, I also trained him and the CEO how to be more, they were part of my training, how to be more empowering. So in that course, the first, let's say a few hours is only focusing on different leadership styles and agility and engineers. And there's a video which I show about, one is like this football coach, and he's like very, let's say, directive in his leadership. And then there's one about like the Lord of the Rings, where it's more of a servant leadership, and they're stepping up, and I compare them, and then it's like, okay, which one looks like engineers? which kind of, and then this other video with the football, I said, what happens when that coach is sick? What happens to the team? It's not that that's a bad leader, but it's not the right kind of leader for engineers. So it actually became part of the training, and I am still in contact with that particular CTO and CEO. They invited me this year to some celebration, and they put me on the stage or whatever as the Sarah effect. So I got celebrated for shifting the organization because I dared to tell them that what they were doing was not empowering their teams.
Cool, that's awesome. Was that then the trigger for you taking on and moving into leadership coaching and developing your own training?
Before that, like I said, I had experience having been a head of tech some years before, and I actually stepped away from it again to be an engineer because I failed drastically. I did all of the things that I told you that you shouldn't do when I was the architect, the designer, the coder, the head of tech. I was absolutely disempowering. I was a horrible micromanager. I did all of those things. And then I said, leadership is not for me. I stepped away from it. And I went back to being an engineer again. But that particular job where the Sarah effect was actually the transition for me. Like, I am now ready for leadership. And I ended up, because I was empowered by that particular leader, I mean, he believed in me and he empowered me to take ownership of not just complaining about this is wrong, but okay, fix it. And then let's bring it. It was that moment when I started creating my own, let's say, tools. When I did go into engineering management, and eventually I became a director of engineering and all of this stuff. Like I had this massive tool set, and I had I don't know, there was a certain point where I just had the confidence that I'm doing this right. Like I think others can benefit from this, and I just started training people, and people gave great reviews and they wanted more of it, and just kind of grew and shifted into that. So
cool, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I think we would be so much better off if more leaders, probably across all industries, were able to do that, able to step back and say, I'm not doing this right, I'm making a mess of it. How can I get better? As you said right at the beginning, so many people aren't confident, aren't reflective enough about themselves to better recognize that in themselves, then express it, then be vulnerable. Even if you're not probably vulnerable, and I don't know whether you said it to anyone or not, but even if you just go, I'm making a mess of this, I should switch roles and get something that's
if there's a trait that I've always had, and that's the thing, people become micromanagers for different reasons. Mine was not based in ego at all. It was really based in this feeling of, if you look at the dragons in my room, abandonment, real fear that I'm not good. I'm a bad person, and because of that, I had this dragon like deep within myself my whole life. It manifested me into this extremely hard person on myself. I always had the voice like, I'm bad. I need to get better. So I was constantly in self-reflection and wanting to have therapy, wanting to learn, so I always had this like self-reflection, and very hard on myself, and it wasn't until getting much older, and definitely a few years after that experience and being a bad manager, that I finally identified those particular dragons in my life, and I could finally map them to my behaviors, like, why was I doing these things? And that's where real change happens. If you just address the behaviors, and that's where I think a lot of these trainings go wrong, is they're just addressing what's on the surface. And if you just address that, very often it's not connected to what's really driving them deep, deep, deep within. And so if you address this down here, and for me, once I, let's say, embraced abandonment, it's with me, and all the time I'm going to even still in my life, have situations where if someone doesn't respond to a message, or like someone is, where I get into this kind of like panic, like, oh my god, maybe I'm not good enough or something like that. But now I'm like, oh, that's you, like, that's me. I'm just going to sit with this feeling, because I know from the evidence in the room everything will be okay, because I'm worthy and I'm good enough. And that's the confidence that changed to this person now, which my teams can be safe with. Before, I was so reactive in a way, or I was affected and then I was projecting. I was even sometimes someone's behavior, even though it had nothing to do with me, in my head, it would become all about me. And then I was responding, like reacting on that. That's not good leadership. Like a leader, it's not that you get rid of all of your fears, and it's not that you get rid of all of the dragons in your room. You instead, that they're there and they are you, and you learn to sit with that uncomfortable feeling, because the uncomfortable feeling will go away, and you wouldn't have burned everything in the process. You can still be okay, because when you're on, the floor, and you probably know that, there's going to be all different kind of personalities. There's going to be people that are losing their tempers, going to be all kind of like things that have to get done or things that have to get fixed. If you cannot handle, your own dragons, you can't stand in those storms with this stoic calm that your teams need, where you can actually make good decisions, where you can actually ask the right questions. And that's the skills which leaders need to learn. It's not, okay, we can fill out this form or do this performance review.
I absolutely agree. And if I was to try and compress that into a few words, which obviously not going to do it justice, I would say that you're really talking about a high degree of emotional intelligence, of being able to recognize and be self-aware, be reflective, and to be able to identify and name your emotions and name the stuff. But teaching emotional intelligence is hard, and it takes a long time. And I think that's why so much leadership stuff ducks it, because they try to provide 2 or 3 day or maybe a week training course where, hey, you've got these symptoms, you've got this problem, here's a framework that fixes it, here's what you do, rather than tackling that. Emotional intelligence takes months or years even to develop and to improve on. But I do believe it can be improved on. It's a skill we can all learn. Some of us perhaps adapted more naturally to it, and some of us have to work quite hard at it. But we can all drastically improve where we are. So having made that step and recognised where you were, been able to reflect yourself, do you have any hints or tips for anyone else how they can become more effective and improve their emotional intelligence in the way you did?
I have worked with, because I've trained a lot of people to step up in their leadership by now. And I've worked with all different types of people. So different personality types, from the challengers, which are really, they struggle with vulnerability, and people which sometimes even struggle, like you said, identify what feeling they have. Some people don't have that language. Or even it could be that based on their neurology that they have, based on different experience they had in their past, people are dealing with all kind of things. And at the beginning of the journey, a lot of these individuals are so hard on themselves, like, this is not going to be possible for me. I'm not like emotionally rich, and I have seen all of them. I have not had one person that I've worked with that has been trapped in a place of not being able to expand their emotional intelligence. It takes patience. Sometimes there have been people that, for example, had to go through my program twice. I always offer it for free the next time in case that's it, because they're just not ready yet, but it really takes this patience with yourself, and it's a slow process. You can't, and I've been in those programs where they try to rush through all of the layers of your personality in a weekend, and maybe you can, let's say, logically do that, but that's not how we work. You have to kind of dissect a layer. You have to see how it's connected to the next layer. You have to sit in that feeling like, ooh, this is feeling a certain way. And then you have to get through that and be like, okay with it. And you have to do that one layer at a time. And you need to start reacting. You'll see that the way that you stand in rooms is a little bit different each moment. The way you start reacting to situations is a little bit different each moment. And trust the process, because it's not a fast game. You can't, and that's hard for people that are really used to achieving things really fast, like checklist. It's not like and depending on how much trauma you may have, or how much you're dealing with, like you said, sometimes it's years. Sometimes people are okay in a few months because they're fast at figuring that out. I have a section in my book, which I spent a lot of time on, actually, about empathy, specifically, the 13 types of empathy, because there's not just one. Some people have more like where they actually feel what the other person feels, like it hits them. Some people have this more logical empathy, like they can just kind of like step into it. You have different kinds of empathy, like where you just give people the space to speak, but maybe you're not feeling what they feel. I give let's say, the tool for those, because they exist, especially in engineering, more often than others. Of course, they exist everywhere, but tools for people which really struggle with it, because there are types of empathy in which every individual, even if you're the most logical, can step into with just a few tweaks, like a bit more active listening, a bit more questioning in a different way, a bit more shifts in the way that you approach things. And then you have people which they have the opposite, which is a negative thing. They have too much empathy where they're absorbing everything. They need a tool to be able to, like, okay, you shouldn't do that either. You need to have this like clear boundary between this is me and this is you, so it's, whether you're on this side of the spectrum or that side of the spectrum, you can learn it. It just takes practice, and it takes awareness of where you are at, and acceptance. Like, maybe empathy is hard for you, and that's okay. And that's one of the things I don't like when I'm reading on LinkedIn and stuff. There's a lot of people that say you have to have a high EQ, or you have to have, some people don't. And what you're telling those managers, because you don't have a high EQ, you're not going to be good at this. And that's not the case. You can improve skills which can help you, let's say, peel back the layers of people. Some people are going to be better at it. They've got this magic, the skill of like looking in, but you can still be 10 times better than you are today, because you're making that effort and you want to be. This is a skill that can be learned. So be patient with yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I hadn't thought about 13 types of empathy before. I think, what you mentioned there makes me feel that, well, I could do some more reflection on that. I want to see the list now, but yeah, you're absolutely right. There are many different ways that it comes through. And probably even if you are a low EQ leader, a lot of those things you mentioned are, I don't know what the phrase is. They're things that you could do even if you don't quite mean them yet as you practice. So I think you mentioned one where we could step back and give somebody the space. You can be very logical about that before you ingrain the habit, before you're really truly feeling empathetic. You could still be logical and say, I'm going to pause for 3 seconds before I respond to anything. So in a way, you could, horrible phrase, but fake it till you make it. You could start being empathetic by creating some behaviors that start to get there that I think would help you develop the genuine EQ. Does that make sense?
Actually, and that's a misunderstanding. Empathy doesn't mean that you actually feel as though you're walking in someone else's shoes. Nobody can do that. Anyone that thinks that they can really feel what somebody else is feeling just because they have a similar experience, or they are maybe similar in who they are or something, is absolutely wrong. And just going into that kind of, with that kind of arrogance, you're already off. So EQ, if you study psychology, which I'm really deep into, is such a misunderstood topic. You don't have to feel what the other person is feeling to show empathy. There's different types of empathy, and based on if you're hypersensitive or not, based on if you've had trauma or not, based on what you needed when you were a child to survive, based on there's a really interesting book that I read about a sociopath, and she's a psychologist, or she studies psychology, and she's amazing, and she can't feel anything, but she demonstrates empathy. So empathy is really this, like I said, there's many different types, but it's an effort to go out of yourself so that another person can exist in that space with you. And everyone, from the sociopath to the person which had to be hypervigilant when they were a child, because if they did something, then they would get hurt, and they developed a kind of like hyper empathy. All of them can get better at it, and that's something which I think is not talked about enough. There's too much of this, you have to be this kind of person, you have to have this personality type, or you have to, and I have seen every personality type step up and level up as leaders.
So once again, it's that same thing. We're trying to boil it back down to something that you can read in a book, learn on a 2-day course, and compress it as, empathy is this, active listening is this, and package it up into a simple thing, like we've done so many of these things down, unfortunately. Pivoting then slightly from empathy, what about introverts? How do you feel that introverts, or do you feel introverts can be good leaders? If so, why? If not, why? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think I'm a great leader. I'm an introvert. There's a misunderstanding about what an introvert is versus somebody that's bold and brave. You can be a bold and brave and social introvert. You can also be a shy, reserved extrovert. So introversion is let's say, a word to demonstrate how your brain processes information. So you are processing it alone in your mind, and it takes you maybe time to get to the result, so you might be slower to respond, while the extrovert is talking it out loud. They think outside, or the introvert's thinking inside. So when I'm in a meeting and it's not run in a, let's say, inclusive way, I'm very silent. You don't hear me. And it's not because I'm afraid, or because I'm bold. I'm brave. I can stand on a stage, but I need time to process information. And also, if lots of information is shooting at me, I get exhausted. I hate small talk. I only like deep talk. I hate office parties. I know how to exit quietly so that nobody knows that I'm leaving. And I actually, to be honest, and I don't want to offend extroverts out there, it's my experience that introverts are better leaders than extroverts, because the mere ability to think before talking is already stoic in itself. You're not reacting out loud and, let's say, driving everyone, because everyone's responding like, oh, and then they get to where they need to go. Finally, they got to the conclusion, but by the time they got there, everyone's gone here and then here and then here. So you're dragging everyone along your thinking process. And that can be unstable.
So I haven't read it yet, but there's a book, Quiet, I believe.
Yeah, Quiet, yeah.
I've forgotten the author.
I have it in my reading list.
Yeah, it's in my reading list too, but I believe that her point again there is that, there are a lot of very strong, very capable leaders who are introverts.
Yeah, Susan Cain.
Since Kane.
Yeah.
I believe that's very similar to her point there. There's a lot of introverts that make great leaders. And again, people forget that you don't have to be loud and brash to be a good leader. I mean, take it extreme. I don't believe Gandhi went around shouting his head off and creating a lot of noise and was big, bold, and brash, but he made a hell of a change. Mother Teresa, another example there. So we can lead in many different ways. It's more about setting an example, setting a vision that people can then get behind and follow. And that could be being loud and brash. And, maybe that works in the sports field where you want to, charge it of a team's goal or whatever. It could also just be by quietly getting on with things, doing something, and showing that what you're doing makes a difference.
Yeah. And I mean, there are great extroverted leaders, which I would say typically they're the more loyalty type, like they create these like clans and they're like really boisterous, and there are a lot of people that resonate with that. And also there's cultures which resonate more with that kind of leadership, because I'm not actually really good at that. Like I am not I will arrange board games with my team, but I'm not really arranging a lot of, let's say, get-togethers where we're all like drinking drinks and like chumming around, because it's not really how I prefer to socialize. Like it's harder for me to think of doing things like that. And I know that there's a lot of people that would prefer that. So one of the good things about the introvert versus the extrovert is I know I'm not good at that. And so I will allow someone else to take that task on if it's needed, because of that ability to reflect and self-think and allow someone else to take the stage. Let's say where sometimes, and I don't want to be rude to extroverts, sometimes I feel like they're so busy talking that they haven't had the time to even hear that people are maybe not enjoying the way that they're planning the events.
Yeah, I definitely feel I've seen that in some social settings, in companies where somebody's saying, "Well, we're all going to go and do this, and it'll be like exciting." You can see there's a quiet bunch of people whose
They're
faces are like,
like, they don't see it.
I mean, it's going back 20 odd years now, but I was on one team with about 40 people where probably a fairly extroverted leader, not that I paid much attention at the time. I was still a junior engineer. They organised a team building weekend away or week that was mandatory, as all these things. So got off to a great start already. Mandatory time away, eating into people's personal time to
On the
build the
weekend,
team.
you're like, great, yeah.
And there were a lot of brash things on the agenda and quite, you know, what some people would love as team building activities. It was utterly disastrous. Of this team of 40, 3 people resigned before they even went.
Mm-hmm.
There were 2 people that apparently got into a not quite a physical fight, but there was definitely some harsh words said and upset and could no longer work together. It did the absolute opposite of team building because it was what one person thought would be a great time for a team, but not recognizing that there's a whole bunch of different people in this team that had. There was a wide range of ages. I mean, I was 21, I think, at the time. There were people on that team that were probably in their mid-50s, everything in between, both genders. There were people from different cultures, different countries, different nationalities. There was no real thought to the fact that we're all different, and this wasn't necessarily going to be everybody's idea of fun.
Yeah. Even small things like putting someone that's hypersensitive into a room with a bunch of other people, like having no place that I can get away from everyone when I need to have quiet time. Like, oh my gosh, like just, yeah, it's so stressful, these kind of events. Yes.
Yeah, and like I say, it was disastrous for team bonding and being
Yeah, exactly.
cool. So you also mentioned agile, not agile earlier. I want to
Mm-hmm.
pull up that thread. What do you mean by that?
Agile, not agile. um, I guess it's a common theme, but at least of recent, but it's a theme that I have identified for years and years, having been an engineer for since the late 90s. So when I entered into engineering, into the engineering world, I joined in the waterfall times, where it was really end-to-end software development. You spent months and months in the design phase, and then if you got hired, then you got to do the development, and then there was like the testing phase, and then deploy. Like, that's where I came from. And then XP, I was introduced to that in about 2003, I think, which is like a form of Agile. And then I think Scrum around 2007, 8, something like that. Anyway, I've seen the history of Agile. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions is if you take a framework and you just execute it without understanding the real why it's there, or even if it comes to a meeting, if you don't, scrutinize what is the purpose of the meeting and what are we trying to get out of it, it ends up being kind of this zombie Scrum mode where you're just functioning and you're just checking off lists and you're actually bringing nothing in which it's intending. And that's the Agile, not Agile. Like agility in its, let's say, birth form, or it's really meant to focus on people versus process, and it's adding the human element to software development. And somehow at some point it's become more robotic than software development. So that's the aspect of it. And I really believe in Agile. I know there's this whole anti-Agile movement. I'm a big believer in proper Agile, but I think that so many struggle to understand how to do it, and they don't get it. It's really being able to take a framework and cut out the stuff that doesn't do anything for you and do things differently. You don't have to have a stand-up that looks the same as every other stand-up. There's so many different forms of stand-ups, and depending on what the team is like, what the team needs, what the personalities are. So ask, what's the purpose of it? Okay, it's to have connection, or it's to create forward movement, or it's to, once you get to the purpose, then, okay, what are the different formats that we can think of to do those things? And imagine every single, event that would be in Kanban or in Scrum or any of the different lean, whatever. You need to be able to scrutinize, what's the purpose of this event? How can we do it differently? How can we double loop learn and get to the place where we're actually improving the way that we are functioning as a team together, rather than just checking off the list, being brain dead, listless. I remember the times where it was end to end, and I know we were waterfall, but we were not listless. We were passionate because we were there at the solution. We were not monkeys. Like, I remember that time. I don't support waterfall, but I do support that kind of energy that came from that time. And I remember it. And somehow with the introduction to these, let's say, methods and, siloing engineers away from business and trying to protect them from this end-to-end thinking, and it's destroyed the passion that early engineers we had. I don't know, we finished, we delivered, and we didn't mind working a bit late because we felt so passionate about the solutions because we were part of it. And so Agile needs to have that tied into it.
I think you've just described a perfect failure to actually do Agile in what so many people do when they do Agile these days. In that XP, as the first Agile process that I
it was amazing.
Absolutely. And there were Agile processes before that, like RAD and DSDM and so on, but XP was the first one that I read the book and went, yeah, this is by software developers, yes, for software developers. Yeah. It recognizes the value. But something that everybody since has seemed to have missed is that the key part of XP was customer and the team. We're not insulating software developers from the customer or the business or whatever whoever is using, no, basically, whoever's
We
the
were
customer,
connected with the
we're
customer.
pulling it together
We
and
were
we're having that,
together.
yeah,
Like
having that
and we were so agile, like really agile. I loved XP. Like, yeah. And I don't know.
I don't understand how anyone can ever expect to build anything great when the people building it are not connected to the customer.
And it has
If
a lot to do with mission and passion and our internal drivers. And when you get people that are not, let's say, part of the solutionizing, telling them how to develop the solutions, like one of the reasons that a lot of engineers became engineers is they like to be inventors. That they want to create and and then you take all of that out of them. You tell them how to do it, and you don't tell them why.
exactly, and when you don't tell them why, you tell them what you think is the solution.
Yeah, and it's usually
And
bad solutions.
yeah, I mean, I think it's probably an urban myth at this stage, but there's that old story about needing to light in space and trying to invent a pen that would light in space versus somebody just saying, well, just use a pencil. Again, if we've got that closer connection between the people solving the problem and the people with the problem, you get to look at what they're doing, what the actual issue is, and talk to them. Often the solution you'll see was very, very different from that kind of Chinese whispers effect of, hey, they want this, talk for somebody else, it should do this, to the solution is this, build it. But we've lost that
Yeah, I always
communication.
use the example of it might be a silly example, but the customer says, "I want to touch that tree." So the engineer is busy, like we're going to go down the stairs and we're going to like go around the corner and we're going to walk down the street and we're going to we have to open up the door. Like all of these things is to touch the tree. And then there's one engineer that says, why? Why do you want to touch the tree? and then the customer says, it's so stuffy in here. And the tree like reminds me of fresh air. So then the engineer's like, okay, can we just open the window? That's what you miss when you don't let the engineer be part of the solution, the reason that they're solving the stuff. You need engineers also to be able to push back. What's the real value here? Because often customers, and it's not that customers are stupid or something like this, but they don't know what they could have or what they want. I even remember learning that years ago in university. Your customer does not know yet. So they only know what they've seen before. So if we didn't have, let's say, agility in a proper form, we would have never had the iPhones that we have today. We would still be pushing start and going up and scrolling over to open up an application because that's how it was done. Like remember where it's like you had to go up and open it to get, and then you had that iPod that suddenly you were circling. That was a different way to do something similar. And if you would not allow engineers to be part of the thinking process, or you would never have these kind of like evolutions in the way that we do things.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that classic story of Henry Ford. If he asked his customers, they wanted a faster horse. You need to have those conversations. You need to be able to have that two-way involvement, and we lose that a lot. Like, is there anything else that you would like to share with the listeners, Sarah?
I think that leaders, and I've worked with so many leaders that somehow have boxed engineers into this. They're because they're hard to understand because they speak a different language. If you imagine they're more logical, like maybe they're not as flowing, maybe they're not as extroverted, that they're not intelligent, that they're not intelligent to the point that they can understand what business means or what the organization needs or what their end customers need. Engineers are capable and can understand it. And if you want to have a business that's going to exist in the future, you need to bring engineers up to that language, to that way of speaking, to connecting what they do with actual value, because they can do it. They're smart. They just speak different language. So I think that's the main thing. And then go one step deeper. Leaders, connect what's in here in the core of people. You have to get good at digging into your own core to be able to get into someone else's core. Once you have learned how to get into your core, you start to learn how to get into someone else's core. And it's about connecting those passions, those missions, those how people get motivated toward the company goals. And that's where you get productivity from. All of the other stuff is actually not that important.
Absolutely. And from the flip side, I would encourage every engineer to try and get out there and learn the language of the business, go and learn more about the business, grow that domain knowledge, learn to speak to other people in the business, go and talk to marketing, go and talk to sales, talk to customer support, and get that better understanding of what your customers do, what the business does, and why.
Everything you do is actually for a customer in the end.
Yeah,
if you don't have the customer, you don't have a job.
Okay, so my final question for today.
Okay.
I have followed you on LinkedIn for a little over a year, I think.
Oh, nice.
And there are two things that always stand out about you. And you, apologies for labeling you, because I shouldn't label people, but in my head, you are the green dragon lady. Love to hear more about that.
And I'm wearing green today. And I have some dragons here behind me.
Every single LinkedIn post you got has had some green. I think you had green hair when I first saw your profile picture, and you have dragons on, I think, every post. Love to hear more about that in the final few minutes, if you're happy to share.
Green. Well, I think I was mentioning it to you before. It's not my favorite color because it's very hard for me. Maybe it's my logical brain to pick a favorite color, but green makes me feel at peace, at ease. And I think it's because of nature. When I stand with my feet in dirt, in sand, on grass, I smell leaves. I hear the leaves blowing in the wind. I feel so good. And I can have the worst day, and I'm 48 years old, and you will still see me laying in the grass and just looking up at the sky. Like that's so green for me is a feeling, and I bring this feeling into my business, I think, a lot. So you see a lot of green. Dragons. It's the year of my birth, so Chinese astrology, but it's more than that. It has multiple dimensions. I like that the dragon in itself is kind of genderless. So it's not necessarily masculine or feminine. It's embodying both. It's also introverted. It likes to go to its cave. It needs time to get its power, its strength. I like using the metaphors a lot because a dragon can kill you, can burn you alive, can devastate villages, but it's also deeply loyal. It protects its horde. And it has this kind of ability to unlock power. It's powerful. And so when I combine it with leadership, and we're talking about those dragons in the room, for me, abandonment, for example, before I came to peace with this part of myself, and before I could integrate with this part of myself, this was a dragon which was burning up everything in my environment. It was burning me up. It was killing me. It was angry. I was pushing it out the door and ignoring it by escapism, all of these things that you do when you're trying to avoid being abandoned. And it got mad, by accepting that this is a dragon I live with. I live with it because of my early childhood, because of the experiences I had. I've accepted it. I've learned how to sit with this dragon. I've learned how to speak sweet mantras to this dragon. Like, okay, let's say they do leave. You're still worthy. Now I have access to the power this dragon has given me. Abandonment dragon, for example, has given me immense capability for empathy. Because when I was young, I was so fearful that the people that loved me would go away. I was hyper vigilant in making sure that everyone is happy in my space, which developed an extreme ability for empathy. But I never had access to that power because the dragon was burning me alive until I could make peace with it. So there's a lot about the dragons. When we have become the dragon, it means we have completely integrated with these things that used to burn us alive, and we've absorbed the power. And that's when I say you're now ready to lead.
Wow. You've thought about that a lot and reflected on it a lot.
I overthink all the time. It's one of my traits.
Oh, thank you for sharing that with us, Sarah. So we'll stick up all of your links in the show notes. So aside from LinkedIn, where people can see your posts on a fairly regular cadence with lots of pictures of dragons, where else should people follow you and come to find out more and learn about the 13 types of empathy?
Avegasso Coaching, so avegasso.com. That's in English, AVAGASSO.com. There you can buy my book. You can also book a leadership course with me. I also do one-on-one coaching for people that are not quite ready for the leadership course. And I'm also on Instagram and Facebook and all of these places, but LinkedIn is where I really, let's say, connect with the community more. But I do have a bi-weekly campfire, which people in my Avegasso community can meet like this. And we actually share challenges and we try to help each other. And I do that every 2 weeks. So you can connect there going to avegasso.com in the events part community.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Sarah. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
It's been such a pleasure to finally be in a room with you. I have been following you and admire your exercises and what you bring to the community very much. I think that the engineering community needs people like you out there. So yeah, this is a pleasure for me.
I think the same.
Great. So thank you.